Monica Harris walked through the busy city streets, her young daughter Aaliyah close by, clutching her hand tightly as the gnawing hunger in her stomach made each step heavier. She carried a small bag, worn and tattered, and a sense of quiet desperation weighed on her heart. Monica knew the world around her was preoccupied with its own concerns, and she hoped no one would notice the quiet struggle she and her daughter faced. Yet the innocent longing in Aaliyah's eyes pierced her resolve and shook her from within. They approached a modest restaurant, the warm glow of lights and the aroma of food offering a brief flicker of hope, but fear still tugged at Monica, fear that someone might judge their poverty or look down upon them. Inside the restaurant, a lavish table caught her attention. Will Lancaster sat with his daughter Sophia, their table overflowing with opulent dishes, the gleam of fine cutlery and perfectly arranged food reflecting in the sunlight. Aaliyah's gaze flickered toward the bounty, her small face filled with innocent curiosity and silent desire, and Monica's heart clenched at the sight. She gripped her bag tightly, preparing to leave quietly with her daughter, wanting to shield her from the world's judgment. Yet, fate had a moment in store, a silent turning point that neither Monica nor Aaliyah could foresee. A moment that would quietly alter the course of their lives forever. Monica and Aaliyah quietly stepped inside the restaurant, their footsteps soft against the polished wooden floor, each movement deliberate so as not to attract attention. Monica's eyes darted nervously around the room, noting the comfortable diners laughing, chatting, and enjoying their meals. A stark contrast to the gnawing emptiness in her own stomach. Her fingers trembled slightly as she guided Aaliyah to a small, vacant corner table, careful to make it seem like they belonged, though every instinct in her screamed otherwise. From across the room, Will Lancaster's gaze briefly flickered in their direction, though he dismissed it as another passing shadow. Yet his daughter Sophia, ever observant and unassuming, had already noticed the small, anxious pair entering. Sophia's eyes lingered, drawn by something unspoken, something invisible yet profoundly human that transcended wealth and status. Monica, oblivious to their attention, unwrapped a small, meager snack she had brought with her, her hands shaking as she offered it to Aaliyah, hoping it would fill even a fraction of the hunger that twisted inside her daughter's tiny frame. Every bite taken by Aaliyah felt heavy, filled with both gratitude and guilt, and Monica could not stop the waves of shame and worry washing over her. She feared exposure, feared judgment, and yet, somewhere deep inside, she clung to a fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, some unseen force would notice their struggle. And in that quiet, tension-filled moment, as Sophia's eyes remained fixed on Aaliyah's careful, tentative bites, an unspoken connection began to form, an invisible thread of empathy stretching across tables, between wealth and want, innocence and responsibility, quietly pulling the worlds of Monica Harris and William Lancaster closer in ways neither of them could yet understand. Time seemed to slow for Monica as she watched Aaliyah nibble at the small piece of bread she had managed to bring, each bite a mixture of relief and quiet despair. And yet the weight of the world seemed to press harder with every passing second. The restaurant buzzed around them, laughter, clinking cutlery, conversations blending into a distant hum, but for Monica it was almost deafening, a reminder of everything she lacked. Her eyes kept flicking toward Will Lancaster's table, not out of envy, but instinctively scanning the room for danger, judgment, or the faintest glimmer of understanding. Sophia, seated across from her father, could not tear her eyes away from the mother and child. There was something about their quiet dignity, the way Monica moved with careful restraint, and the way Aaliyah's small hands clutched her meager snack, that stirred a deep, unnameable feeling in her. She tugged gently at her father's sleeve, yet Will's attention remained on the lavish dishes before him, the piles of food meant for abundance rather than need. Still, something in the room shifted imperceptibly. The delicate line between worlds of privilege and poverty began to blur in a glance, in a silent acknowledgement of hunger and humanity. Monica felt a chill run down her spine, a premonition that this ordinary meal, this quiet attempt to survive another day, was about to collide with a force beyond her comprehension. She adjusted her scarf, smoothed her daughter's hair, and tried to focus on the simple act of nourishing her child, unaware that every movement, every careful breath, was being recorded in the consciousness of Sophia Lancaster. And somewhere across the room, Will, oblivious to the gravity of the moment, remained poised on the edge of an awakening, a life-changing recognition that was fast approaching, silent but inevitable. Monica felt her heart tighten as she glanced up from Aaliyah's small, careful bites, sensing a gaze she could not yet place, a quiet awareness that made her skin prickle. Across the room, Sophia's eyes had not wavered, her innocent curiosity anchoring her to the small, fragile figures at the corner table. The contrast between the opulent, overflowing dishes on her father's table and the meager scraps Monica tried to stretch into a meal for her daughter was stark, almost painfully so, and the disparity seemed to hang in the air like a tangible weight. Monica tried to keep her composure, straightening Aaliyah's tiny shoulders and reminding herself to breathe, to stay calm, yet every instinct screamed for escape from the humiliation, from the prying eyes, from the silent reminder of the world's indifference to their struggle. Meanwhile, Will Lancaster, finally noticing the unusual intensity in his daughter's gaze, felt a flicker of curiosity break through his habitual detachment. Something about the way Sophia looked, with quiet concern and unspoken questions, nudged him toward awareness. The room seemed to shrink around Monica as she sensed an invisible thread pulling attention toward her, a subtle yet undeniable focus on her presence. She tightened her grip on Alia's hand, heart racing, convinced that the fragile shield of invisibility she had relied on her entire life was cracking. And in that moment, suspended between fear and hope, despair and possibility, the first quiet stirrings of connection began to bridge the vast divide between worlds. The polished, gleaming table of the billionaire and the small, trembling corner where Monica and Aaliyah tried to survive the crushing weight of hunger and shame. Each second stretched endlessly, pregnant with anticipation, as if the universe itself held its breath, waiting for the inevitable collision of compassion and circumstance. The tension in the restaurant grew almost imperceptibly as Monica tried to focus on the simple act of feeding Alia, yet every clink of cutlery and murmur of conversation seemed amplified in her mind, a reminder of the gulf between their world and the one around them. Alia's small hands trembled slightly as she lifted the bread to her lips, and Monica felt a pang of helplessness so deep it threatened to swallow her entirely. Across the room, Sophia's eyes remained fixed, wide with a silent intensity that refused to let the scene go unnoticed. Will Lancaster, initially preoccupied with his own life and the comfort of abundance, felt an unfamiliar tug at his chest as he followed his daughter's gaze. For the first time, the layers of privilege and routine began to peel away, leaving a raw, unfiltered glimpse of struggle that he could not ignore. Monica, unaware that she was being watched, adjusted Alia's scarf and tried to keep her movements calm. Yet every subtle gesture, every careful bite, every furtive glance carried the weight of 1,000 unspoken fears. The invisible wall between them and the world of wealth and comfort began to crack, and an electric, almost shocking anticipation filled the space between tables. In that fragile, suspended moment, fate seemed to pause, holding the next heartbeat of their lives in balance, ready to tilt irrevocably. Monica's mind raced with worry, but deep within, a quiet flicker of hope emerged, fragile as a candle flame in the wind, hinting that the course of this ordinary day could soon be rewritten by an extraordinary act of awareness and compassion. And though no one spoke a word, the room itself seemed to hum with the unspoken truth that something remarkable was about to unfold. A collision of worlds that would leave an indelible mark on both mother and child, and perhaps even on the man who had finally begun to see beyond his own table. A subtle shift had begun to ripple through the air in the restaurant, almost imperceptible yet powerful, as Will Lancaster's gaze lingered longer on Monica and Aaliyah. Each careful bite Aaliyah took seemed to echo in his mind, a stark, undeniable contrast to the lavish abundance on his own table. Sophia, sensing something unspoken and deeply human, tugged ever so slightly at her father's sleeve, her eyes wide and pleading, silently asking him to notice the quiet struggle before them. Will felt an unfamiliar tightening in his chest, a strange blend of guilt, responsibility, and awakening curiosity that refused to be dismissed. Monica, still unaware of the growing attention, felt the weight of the world pressing in with every passing second. Every flicker of light on the polished floor seemed to highlight the emptiness of their corner. Every murmur from nearby diners a subtle reminder of what they lacked. She tightened her grip on Aaliyah's hand, a protective instinct battling with exhaustion, fear, and hope all at once. And then, in a single shocking instant, their worlds collided. Will's mind, conditioned by decades of wealth and detachment, began to truly see what he had never bothered to notice before: the vulnerability of hunger, the courage of a mother silently fighting to protect her child, and the innocent yearning of a little girl who dared to hope for more than her small portion. The air seemed to thrum with anticipation as an invisible thread of connection wove itself between the two tables, fragile yet unbreakable. In that quiet, tense, and almost sacred moment, a decision was forming, one that would shatter the ordinary flow of the day and replace it with a profound act of compassion, a choice that could change lives forever. Monica and Aaliyah remained unaware, caught in the gravity of survival, yet fate had already begun to tip. preparing to deliver a moment so extraordinary it would be remembered long after the bread was eaten, and the restaurant emptied. In the quiet tension of the restaurant, the moment that had been building seemed to stretch into eternity, every heartbeat echoing with anticipation. Monica's hands trembled slightly as she adjusted Alia's small scarf, trying to shield her daughter from the subtle gaze of others, unaware that her courage and quiet dignity had already captured the full attention of the table across the room. Sophia's eyes remained fixed on the tiny, fragile pair, a mixture of empathy, curiosity, and silent pleading written clearly across her face. Will Lancaster, feeling a surge of awareness unlike anything he had experienced before, realized that he could no longer remain passive, that the invisible barrier separating privilege from struggle had to be breached. His mind raced, grappling with decades of habit, entitlement, and routine, yet deep inside, a raw, undeniable impulse to act emerged. He looked at Sophia, and in that silent, wordless exchange, understood the power of compassion, of bridging the impossible gap that divided their worlds. Monica, sensing nothing yet, focused entirely on keeping Aaliyah nourished and calm, unaware that her quiet bravery had ignited a profound human response in someone whose wealth had insulated him from such realities for years. And then, in a subtle, almost miraculous motion, Will rose slightly from his chair, a decision made not through words but through the clarity of recognition. A recognition that hunger, dignity, and humanity transcended money and status. The atmosphere seemed to shift, the restaurant itself holding its breath, as the collision of two very different lives was about to unfold, quietly, dramatically, and irrevocably. Monica and Aaliyah were still bound by fear and hope. Yet the first threads of change were already being woven, invisible yet undeniable, signaling that the ordinary day would soon become extraordinary in a way none of them could have predicted. The quiet hum of the restaurant seemed to fade into the background as Will Lancaster's attention fully settled on Monica and Aaliyah. His senses suddenly sharpened to the subtle details he had long ignored, the worn fabric of Monica's coat, the careful way she portioned each bite for her daughter, the quiet restraint in her movements that spoke volumes about a life lived under pressure and scarcity. Sophia, still wide-eyed and observing, reached instinctively for her father's hand, silently urging him to act, her innocence a mirror reflecting what he had overlooked in his years of comfort and luxury. Monica's heart raced, though she remained unaware of the attention she had drawn. Her mind was consumed with fear of embarrassment, of being judged for daring to enter a world that seemed so far from her own. Each bite Aaliyah took felt weighted with hope and anxiety, a delicate balance between survival and the invisible shame that often accompanied it. And then, like a sudden gust of wind breaking through a long stagnant room, Will leaned slightly forward, breaking the invisible distance between their tables. His eyes met Monica's for the briefest instant, a silent acknowledgement, a recognition of her struggle, of the courage it took to survive unnoticed, and of the humanity that connected them despite the worlds that separated them. In that fleeting yet monumental moment, Monica felt a subtle shift, a warmth that she could not place, a sense that the universe had briefly tilted in their favor, though she did not yet know how. Sophia's small hand squeezed her father's, reinforcing the urgency of empathy, while Will's heart raced with a mixture of guilt, awakening, and the undeniable urge to act. The stage was set for the first act of transformation, for a gesture that would forever alter the course of Monica and Aaliyah's lives, turning an ordinary meal into a moment of life-changing significance. The moment finally arrived when the invisible tension that had been building for hours transformed into something tangible, almost electric, as Will Lancaster rose slightly from his chair, carrying with him a quiet decisiveness that shattered the invisible barrier between privilege and need. Monica's heart skipped a beat, though she still did not fully understand why, as a sense of awareness seemed to descend upon her like a gentle yet powerful weight. Aaliyah looked up from her small portion of bread, her eyes wide with a mixture of curiosity and cautious hope, sensing a shift in the energy around them even without knowing its source. Sophia's gaze remained fixed, unwavering, as if silently guiding her father to do what his conscience had long refused to acknowledge. Will extended his hand toward the server, gesturing with subtle authority yet unmistakable intent, signaling an action that would forever alter the quiet routine of Monica and Aaliyah's struggle. Monica, still focused on ensuring her daughter ate every crumb, felt an unexplainable warmth brush against her awareness, a strange mixture of fear, suspicion, and hope. And then, as if the world itself had momentarily paused, Will's attention met hers across the room, not in judgment, not in curiosity, but in recognition, in understanding, in a silent promise that her courage had not gone unnoticed. The restaurant, once a place of ordinary meals and muted chatter, now seemed to hold its breath, aware that an extraordinary act of human connection was unfolding. Monica's pulse raced with anticipation. Aaliyah's small hands trembled with the delicate mix of hunger and hope. And in that single suspended heartbeat, the gap between two vastly different worlds began to close, bridged not by wealth or power, but by empathy, awareness, and the quiet recognition of shared humanity. The moment of transformation finally unfolded as Will Lancaster, propelled by the quiet insistence of his daughter's gaze and the undeniable reality of Monica and Aaliyah's struggle, made a deliberate, compassionate decision that would forever change the trajectory of their lives. With careful, measured movements, he signaled the server, requesting that an extra plate be brought over, one filled with food sufficient not only to satisfy hunger but to honor the dignity of those who had quietly endured so much. Monica, sensing the subtle shift in the air but still unsure of its meaning, looked up at the table across the room, her eyes meeting Will's with a mixture of disbelief, suspicion, and cautious hope. Aaliyah, still clutching the remnants of her meager portion, felt her heart leap, sensing that the world might be offering something more than struggle and shame for once. Sophia's small hand squeezed her father's, a silent acknowledgement of the power of empathy, of bridging gaps that money alone could never reach. The food arrived, not as charity, but as recognition, a tangible symbol of awareness, understanding, and human connection. Monica's hands trembled as she accepted the plate, her chest tightening with gratitude so profound it left her momentarily breathless, and Aaliyah's eyes sparkled with the purest form of hope she had ever known. Will watched silently, his own heart stirred by the realization that wealth and privilege were meaningless without the conscious choice to act with humanity. In that single, extraordinary moment, the restaurant itself seemed to pause, every clink of cutlery, every whispered conversation, fading into insignificance against the quiet miracle unfolding at the corner table. Hunger had met compassion, despair had met recognition, and in the space between them, a bridge had been built that no force could undo, forever altering the lives of Monica, Aaliyah, and even William Lancaster himself. The quiet ripple of change spread through Monica and Aaliyah like a gentle, unstoppable wave, each bite of the food before them carrying not just nourishment, but a profound affirmation of their dignity and humanity. Monica's hands shook slightly as she guided Aaliyah's small fingers to the plate, her chest swelling with gratitude so intense it was almost painful, and yet a quiet, lingering disbelief hovered. Could someone truly see their struggle and respond with such thoughtful kindness? Across the room, Will Lancaster remained seated, observing the subtle transformation unfolding before him, the weight of worry lifting from Monica's shoulders, the sparkle of hope igniting in Aaliyah's eyes, and the innocent satisfaction radiating from Sophia, who had played an unwitting but pivotal role in bridging worlds that had seemed irreconcilable. Every detail of the moment, the soft hum of the restaurant, the glint of light on polished tables, the gentle aroma of freshly served food seemed to accentuate the enormity of what had just occurred, turning an ordinary space into the stage of an extraordinary human encounter. Monica's thoughts raced, recalling the countless days of quiet struggle, the moments of hidden despair, the fear of judgment, and now, for the first time, the realization that empathy could be tangible, immediate, and life-changing. Aaliyah's small hand reached instinctively for her mother's, a silent acknowledgement of relief, trust, and awe, while Monica's heart whispered gratitude in ways no words could capture. Will, feeling the quiet resonance of impact within himself, understood that this act, small in gesture yet monumental in significance, had altered not only the lives of the mother and daughter, but also reshaped his own understanding of purpose, awareness, and the responsibility that came with privilege. In the subtle, almost sacred silence that followed, the invisible lines separating fear from hope, despair from recognition, and distance from connection began to dissolve, leaving behind a moment suspended in time, unforgettable in its depth, and a reminder that compassion, once awakened, could bridge even the widest divides. As the meal continued, the world around Monica and Aaliyah seemed to fade, leaving only the quiet, profound connection that had blossomed between them and William Lancaster. Every bite Aaliyah took, every relieved exhale from Monica, carried the weight of countless struggles, now softened by the undeniable presence of empathy and recognition. Sophia, sitting beside her father, watched with quiet satisfaction, understanding in a way only a child could that a single act of compassion could ripple outward, transforming lives in ways impossible to measure. Will felt an unfamiliar warmth coursing through him, a mixture of pride, humility, and awakening, knowing that the barrier between wealth and need had been bridged not through charity alone, but through awareness, attention, and humanity. Monica's eyes glistened as she guided Aaliyah's small hands, savoring each bite, not only for sustenance but for the affirmation that they were seen, valued, and acknowledged as human beings deserving of dignity. The restaurant, once a space of routine meals and muted chatter, had become a sanctuary of transformation, a place where fear met hope, hunger met compassion, and despair met recognition. In that suspended, almost sacred moment, time seemed to hold its breath, allowing the emotional resonance of the encounter to sink deeply into the hearts of all involved. Monica, once invisible and burdened by the harshness of life, now felt the quiet certainty that humanity could, in its own subtle, extraordinary way, reach across divides and heal unseen wounds. Aaliyah's smile, fragile yet radiant, reflected the miracle of being noticed and understood, while Will, watching the transformation unfold, realized that privilege carried responsibility far greater than wealth alone. And as the last crumbs were shared and the final moments of the meal passed, the invisible threads woven between them solidified into lasting change, leaving behind an unforgettable truth that compassion, empathy, and simple human awareness had the power to transform lives, forever altering the course of Monica Harris, Aaliyah Harris, Sophia Lancaster, and William Lancaster, binding them together in a story of hope, recognition, and the enduring power of humanity.